Hello and welcome to GameSec. I thought it'd be fun to check out the 2D games for the Nintendo 64. And can you believe it? This is the 5th GameSec episode dedicated to this console. It's got to be more than any other console by now. Kind of crazy when you think about it. Anyway, my rule for this episode is pretty simple, and that's that there can't be any 3D graphics during the gameplay. And no, I'm not going to get into the semantics about how the 2D graphics are actually created with polygons on the system. You guys know exactly what I mean by this episode. Anyway, oh yeah, I'm not going to cover every 2D game as well, so I'm not going to, cover the Mahjong games or what have you. Thank goodness. Anyway, let's get into it. Let's start with Bakuretsu Muteki Bangayo from Treasure, or simply Bangayo as most people call it. This was only released in Japan on the system. Basically, from what I can tell, you keep getting punched in the face. So you get in your mech and then shoot everything in the space colony down in sweet, sweet revenge. I'm sure there's more to it than that, but I'd rather not know because I'm sure my story is better. Anyway, this one is best played as a twin-stick game, with the D-pad guiding your direction and the analog stick aiming your weapon, though you can only shoot in 8 directions. Basically, you work your way through the short stage and to the boss character. Defeat it and move on to the next stage. With the Z trigger, you can fire off an array of missiles as long as you have enough power left in the gauge and the bottom left of the screen. Also, at any time you can press the L shoulder button to change characters. The boy character, who's blue, fires homing missiles, whereas the girl character fires red ricocheting shots that are actually quite effective. They both have different Z trigger attacks as well. You can shoot down buildings and houses on the space colony to get fruit. The fruit gives you points. And points are way more important to me than their lives. I think the people who live there would agree, though I do hear them scream when I destroy their forever homes. This game is extremely fun. You'll die a lot, but it doesn't matter. You can always continue, and you always want to because you're enjoying yourself so much. The stages are short enough where you never feel bad when you have to do the entire thing again just because you died at the boss. The game also came to the Dreamcast, and back then I was never interested in trying it because of how tiny everything is. I wanted new 3D stuff with polygons. Boy, did I miss out, and so did a lot of other people with that attitude. Fortunately, we all know better now, don't we? It has sharp graphics, good music, and a fun, silly attitude in its presentation. This game is absolutely worth playing. No polygons necessary. Next is Bust-A-Move 2 Arcade Edition from Taito. The premise is pretty simple. Aim your thing and shoot the colored ball that's currently loaded in that direction. Match 3 of any colors to break those balls and make any that were attached underneath them fall. The balls keep moving down and you need to keep them clear before they crush you. You can move your targeting arrow quickly with the analog stick, slowly with the D-pad, or nudge it with the shoulder buttons. This is a game that's probably best with multiple players, though it's certainly not bad in single-player mode. Each stage has a unique introduction, which adds to the charm. The graphics are sharp, but the sound is a little harsh, probably due to its arcade origins. Still, if you turn it down just a bit, you'll be fine. This is a good one. And of course, there's also Bust-A-Move 99 from Taito. This is basically Bust-A-Move 3, just renamed. Gameplay-wise, this is more of the same, which isn't bad, but I feel the presentation is a lot better with this one. I really like the introductions to each stage, which take inspiration from different Taito arcade machines. The sound and music are also much more pleasant in this one. I'm not the best at this game, and I keep winning mainly by not losing, if that makes any sense. I guess that means I'd be toast in the upper levels. The graphics are once again incredibly crisp, with none of the typical blurring or anti-aliasing in sight that the console is known for. There's really nothing to complain about here if you like puzzle games, though if you were only to play one of the 2 Bust-A-Move games on the console, I'd recommend this one. Another puzzle game is Dr. Mario 64 from Nintendo. In this one, Mario uses drugs to make the problems go away. This is a very valuable life lesson for your kids. You match 4 colors and they disappear, and you need to get rid of the germs that are in each bottle. You can play regular Dr. Mario style or the new story version. The story version has you playing against another character similar to other popular puzzle games of the time. I tell ya, I suck at this game. I've never been good at it at all, and for that reason, I can only stand playing for a couple of minutes. But plenty of other people seem to love it. The visuals in this one are a hair softer than the previous 3 games as they decided to keep some of the anti-aliasing turned on. However, the music is fantastic. That's one thing Dr. Mario has always had going for it. Needless to say, if you like Dr. Mario, then there's no reason to think that you wouldn't like this one. Okay, we've had a few puzzle games so far, and spoiler, there's gonna be some more. And there's also gonna be a few odd games, like this next one. Here we have Goemon Mononoke Sugo Roku from Konami. This was only released in Japan. Sadly, this isn't an action platformer, but instead a board game of sorts. It's built with 2D graphics using an isometric perspective. You roll the die in advanced spaces, and you have up to 3 opponents who do the same. You can leave traps on any of the spaces that you land on if there's not already one there waiting for you. And if you land on an opponent's trap, you have to fight it with one of your cards. The entire game is completely in Japanese, so of course I'm just guessing on what to do here, but obviously you want to win. Unfortunately, there isn't a translation for this one yet that I could find. The graphics are mostly pre-rendered, and they look pretty good for what they are. There are a couple of 3D objects during the game, but they don't show up often, so I'm gonna let them slide for this episode. The music is great, with lots of Japanese flavor, and the sound quality is extremely high, close to a CD in many parts. This isn't something I'd recommend unless you know Japanese, but it's interesting that it exists. This is Magical Tetris Challenge from Capcom and Disney. There's no shortage of Tetris games on the Nintendo 64, as you'll see in this episode, and this one features Disney characters. Each one has a story mode, and in order to get the others to help you, you need to defeat them at Tetris. It feels like Tetris at first with the same pieces and rules and whatnot, but eventually you'll start to get some pieces that aren't the norm for Tetris, and some can get kinda crazy big. As you can clearly see, I suck at this. I always have. Most puzzle games just aren't my thing. But I get why more than a few people like Tetris. The Disney characters are an interesting addition, though I can't see how they'd be worth the licensing fee, but I'm not a corporate exec, so what do I know? The graphics are very good, with great pixel art. The music went a very odd direction, however. It feels out of place with Tetris, and it feels even more out of place with the Disney characters. Here's Mario no Photopea, or Mario Photo Studio from Nintendo and a couple of other entities. It was only released in Japan, and this is an English translation. I don't have a smart media card, so all I can really do is this flip puzzle at 3 different skill levels. Anyone remember smart media cards? They were mostly used by Fuji digital cameras. I used to have one. And if I did still have it, as well as a way to actually connect it to the game, I could edit pictures that I had on the card by adding drawings, text, clip art, and other nonsense to the image. I could then take my smart media card and print it at a Fujifilm kiosk. Well, probably not here in the 2020s. This is Midway's greatest arcade hits from Midway and Digital Eclipse. This cartridge has Defender, Robotron 2084, Root Beer Tapper, Joust, Spy Hunter, and Sinistar. Needless to say, all of these are 2D. The games here play mostly okay, if a little clunky sometimes with the Nintendo 64 pad. Occasionally, sound effects are missing, but they eventually show up if you keep playing. The sampled sounds are kinda soft here. Sinistar's voice should be much more menacing, for example. Out of all of these, I had the most fun with Root Beer Tapper, though of course I remember it as just Tapper with real beer. Or digital beer. Nobody likes root beer as much as the customers in this game do. This is Mischief Makers from Treasure. This is a strange game based around grabbing things, shaking them, and throwing them. It's quite odd, and the gameplay mechanics will fight you the whole way through. Treasure is known for being weird and quirky, and that works against them a little bit for this game. Don't get me wrong, there is actually enjoyment to be found here. Basically, you need to find the star at the end of every level, and often you'll need to shake certain things before it will appear. Some stars will just warp you to other parts of the level. Not all of them are an exit. You can grab almost any sprite though, and some of them are super fun to use, like this machine gun. Hell yeah! Other times, the game just gets weird for the sake of being weird because it's Treasure, and they're weird, but weird can still be fun. However, the controls are stiff, and it sometimes feels like they're fighting you. For example, in order to double jump, you need to tap up on the D-pad in midair when everything you've ever learned in video games tells you to simply press the jump button twice. The way they do it here is unnatural, cumbersome, and just a poor choice by Treasure. The learning curve for this one is pretty steep as well. There's no way you can just pull it down from the shelf and play through it. If you haven't played it for a while, it'll take you some time to figure everything out again. And if you've never played it before, the game may piss you off before you make it very far. There are 10 stages per area, and the game only saves between these areas. The graphics are sharp, and the sprites mostly look great. The backgrounds are pre-rendered mostly with some line-scrolling floors. However, I gotta say that the visual design is kind of ugly with all of these ghoulish faces all over the place. So creepy. The game is quite letterboxed, and even with that, it does have some slowdown. The music is pretty typical for Treasure, not sounding dissimilar to Silhouette Mirage. And that's certainly not a bad thing. Also, by the time you get to Area 2, the game introduces stages with built-in polygons. So technically this game doesn't count for this episode, but I wanted to mention it anyway. To sum it up, I'd say that it's absolutely worth trying to see if you like it, but it's not one of Treasure's best efforts. Next is Mortal Kombat Trilogy from Midway. This one combines the first 3 games into one instead of being a simple collection of the first 3. This is another one I've never been good at, and truthfully, I've never been interested in becoming better, so forgive the gameplay that you see here. I like the modern Mortal Kombat games, but these early ones just aren't for me. This game does not go easy on you if you don't already know the ins and outs of the series. However, I do feel that this game is a little bit gimped though, as there's no background animation in some of the stages that should have animation. I know the crowd is supposed to have some movement. Not only that, but the characters themselves seem to be missing frames of animation. The sound is also muffled and quiet. Lastly, the Nintendo 64 controller is far from optimal for fighting games. Anyway, here it is in all of its 2D glory. Well, most of its 2D glory anyway. Up next is a game that I didn't even know was on the console for the longest time. I mean, I knew the PlayStation had a version, of course, since I have it. Why didn't the Saturn get a version? Here's Namco Museum 64 from Namco. This is a compilation of old Namco arcade games similar to what they did on the PlayStation. This one features 6 games including Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Galaga, Galaxian, Pole Position, and Dig Dug. Naturally, all of these are 2D. Well, except maybe for Pole Position, but it's not exactly being rendered with the unmatched polygonal power of the Nintendo 64, so it still counts. The recreations of these games are all mostly pretty good, and they all play fine. Many of them are changed slightly to fit your screen. The sound is a bit off in places, but honestly, most people won't notice or care. Overall, these titles are all perfectly playable for what they are and brought countless minutes of joy to owners of the console. Okay, I think I'm gonna just barely make the finish line before time runs out. Oh, come on! Sadly, the special features of the PlayStation version are gone because Nintendo decided to stick with cartridges.
Midway presents.
This is NBA Hang Time from Midway. This is basically NBA Jam, but they had to change the name since Acclaim had acquired NBA Jam. Anyway, this one basically plays the same, but with updated rosters compared to the older games, a new announcer, newer animations, and all that good stuff. The game is presented just like the older NBA Jam games with a side view of the court which features some exciting line scrolling. At first, I wasn't able to do anything with my player. It turns out that the C buttons are your action buttons for some very bizarre reason that only Midway understands. It took me way too long to figure this out and start making a comeback, but I did. After you do figure out the controls, the game is quite good, just as you'd expect it to be. The music is kind of funny, as it's perhaps a bit chill for the game, but I guess it works. NBA Jam is also on the system, from Acclaim of course, but now is a 3D game that has very little to do with its own arcade roots. Overall, the gameplay, graphics, and audio quality here are quite good.
Lob pass. Boom shakalaka. Barcelona goes up, fires the jumper. Keeler grabs the ball. Goes up, plays it up. He's heating up.
Oh yes, it's the new Tetris. It's Tetris, except it's new. Well, newer isn't always better. You can clear lines, of course, but now you can also make big, solid blocks, for whatever reason. Not really much else to say here, except that you can play against an opponent kind of like a more modern puzzle game. But you don't send attacks to their side or anything, you just compete to see who gets the most lines. The music is random, though sometimes it'll just keep giving you the same track. Aside from the music that plays during the intro, the music is almost kind of depressing. Strangely, the sound effects of the blocks falling are out of sync. I wonder how they didn't catch that. The visuals are dark and actually a little grainy. I doubt you can see the grain very well on YouTube, if at all, and I'm not sure why they decided to add it. This is Tetris, not Silent Hill. I think I'd rather play Magical Tetris Challenge. This one's called Nintama Rantaro 64 Game Gallery. It was only released in Japan and it's from the ever-exciting Culture Brain. Basically, this is a collection of a few different simple mini-games. In this one, you basically just place tiles to reconstruct an image and they get tougher and tougher. I didn't play long enough to see how tough it gets though, and I doubt you would either. But this one is as 2D as it gets. The visuals are very high-res, however the movement of your cursor and the tile isn't the smoothest. Not like it matters in a game like this. Still, this might be a good pseudo brain teaser for the kids. Here's Pokemon Puzzle League. You guessed it, this is a puzzle game with Pokemon characters. This is basically Tetris Attack or Panel de Pon or whatever it's called. You have a cursor that will switch the position of 2 pieces horizontally. You need to get 3 to line up to match, but only horizontally or vertically, not diagonally. You can get used to how to play it quickly, but truly mastering it is another thing altogether. At the beginning of each match, you choose a Pokemon, but this doesn't seem to have anything to do with your ability to create matching lines to get them to disappear. I'm more concerned with leveling up my skill as a human player than my in-game Pokemon. My real-life skill at this game is the only thing that's going to matter here. There's even a 3D mode, which is still technically 2D. You just spin the cylinder around and worry about the pieces that are all over the place. The graphics are good, but not super sharp. I do like how there's a bit of cartoon FMV in here, and it looks and sounds pretty good, all things considered. The music is appropriate, and it doesn't get annoying, which you don't want to in a game like this. Personally, I like this way better than the new Tetris, even though this isn't Tetris. But then again, neither was Tetris Attack.
Keep on trying.
Next up is PUO Puyo Sun 64 from Compile. That's right, it's PUO Puyo, not Puyo Puyo. This is a Japan-only release on the system. It's a puzzle game that, guess what, I actually like. Well, I like it and I kinda don't at the same time. You match 4 of the same colored jelly blobs in any order or shape, except diagonally. Since it doesn't just have to be horizontal or vertical, it really makes this game much more enjoyable to play than other puzzle games, at least in my opinion. However, even if you play single player, it pits you against an opponent in the main mode. The better you do, the more attacks you'll send to their side, like empty blocks that screw things up and the like. Of course, they can do the same thing to you, and they will because the computer does not want you to win. You can get rid of them by matching the colored jelly bobs that touch the clear and otherwise obtrusive items. Look out though, because these attacks can make your side unrecoverable in an instant through no fault of your own. Oh well, I guess it adds a chance element to it and you can always try again. Puzzle games have been like this since the latter part of the 16-bit days when this very series popularized that. The graphics in this one are very sharp, full of color and personality. I do wish the pieces fell at a higher frame rate when they get fast, as the judder makes them hard to see. The sounds, voices, and music are all very clear. It's PUO Puyo, so if you like this one, give it a try. Two years later, we got PUO Puyo 4, PUO Puyo in Party. Kinda weird to see Sega's name on the Nintendo 64 here, but the rights to this franchise were sold to Sega the previous year, though Compile would still develop. Anyway, this one isn't much better or worse than the previous game. Naturally, it still plays the same, and I still enjoy it, even though I'm certainly not a champion-level player or anything. I like games that are still fun, even when you can't seem to improve that much. Truthfully, having fun is the only thing that matters. The mode with opponents is still here, of course. There are also a lot of modes without opponents. The graphics are once again pretty crisp, and the music is decent. The sound suite and the instruments they use for the music in this don't sound quite as pleasant as PUO Puyo Sun 64 though. Still, you can't go wrong with either one of these games. This is another one that was only released in Japan. I loved this next game when it was on the Sega Master System. It was definitely better than the NES version. In fact, I think it might have even been a little bit more colorful than the arcade original. But now, it's been updated for the mid-90s. This is Rampage World Tour from Midway. If you remember the original Rampage, this one plays just like that one. Choose one of 3 monsters and destroy the city. Your goal is to bring down all of the buildings in an area to end the level. Up to 3 players can play at the same time. This one adds a few things, like being able to smash out entire floors of buildings using your feet. This can help bring down buildings much more quickly. The pace of the game as a whole is definitely faster than the original. You can eat people who are trying to shoot you, or even others who are just minding their own business reading a newspaper at a bus stop during all of the chaos. Yeah, what did you think would happen, dude? There are tons of things out there trying to bring you down, mainly the military. They have lots of stuff like tanks, helicopters, jetpacks, and flying things that shoot lasers. They even have a friggin' Ed 209. These things will absolutely wreck you as they're super tough to defeat and they deplete your life in a very speedy manner. There are tons of cities to fight through, even my hometown of Denver here. Looks exactly like it, I can't tell the difference. I like how we have a secret military building here and it even says so right on the front. I enjoy the graphics in this one, but some magazines and websites back in the day complained that they use sprites instead of polygons. The sound is a bit quiet and subdued, but it gets the job done. This is a fun one to play, but really only in short bursts. Rampage 2 Universal Tour, also from Midway, followed the next year. Gameplay-wise, this is more of the same, just like you'd expect. However, this time you choose from 3 different monsters to control. You're actually trying to rescue the monsters from the last game. Again, you're going city to city, destroying everything and then moving on to the next one. The characters in this game are all pre-rendered. The last one looked to be more like claymation. I don't know, it was probably pre-rendered too. Even the backgrounds have an almost pre-rendered feel. Alas, I did not encounter any Ed 209s in my time with this one, but I did encounter an airplane that carpet bombs you. Good luck avoiding this as he keeps flying over you until you can destroy him. The music is definitely more lively in this one. If I had to choose, I think I'd rather play World Tour simply for the Ed 209 and it just seemed to have more humor. But if you like yourself some Rampage action, then either of these is gonna scratch that itch. Here's South Park Chef's Love Shack from Acclaim. This one plays as a game show with you answering some trivia questions. Some of the questions are pretty straight-laced, while others attempt some humor. The game will often be interrupted by mini-games that you can play. These are all 2D as well and have you doing various things to earn points. Naturally, they try to incorporate the show's humor, and it's debatable whether they succeed at it or not. This game came out back when the show was really taking off after it was only like a year or two old, so that's pretty much the era to expect here. This one runs completely in high-resolution interlaced mode, and it mostly looks pretty good. I'm also surprised by the large amount of voices for a cartridge game, and they all sound fairly decent.
Roy, why the hell can't we ever get lovely ladies? Sorry, Chef. Rick James is in town. He's got all the lovely ladies.
At first, I did not care for this game, but it quickly became fun. So fun that I played it again after my first game finally finished, and I was still finding new stuff even then. I think this is a good one to play every once in a while, but it's not one you're going to be coming back to again and again.
Ready? Now pay attention, okay? Now remember what I told you, okay? Go ahead and spank the monkey like I told you, okay? That was pretty good, okay? Now let's try something a little harder.
Next is Starcraft 64 from Blizzard and Mass Media. This is a real-time strategy game where you guide your units around to accomplish various tasks. You often need to build things and mine crystals to power your little manufacturing thingy. I haven't spent a lot of time with this one yet, but I can already tell that this would be a kick-ass game once you learned everything. It doesn't seem super complex, but it's definitely not a pull-off-the-shelf-and-play type of game. The 2D graphics are all excellent for what they are, and the game uses an overhead isometric view. Many of the status screens are in the highest resolution that the console can do, and the detail is amazing. There's even a bit of full motion video here. Look at the Nintendo 64 Go, thinking it's a CD-based console. The action can get slow and choppy when there's lots going on, but you gotta remember, the Nintendo 64 is only 64 bits, which honestly isn't very many. I mean, how many bits does your computer have these days? 64? Oh, okay, never mind then. Unsurprisingly, the sound and music are also top-notch, though the voices can get a bit repetitive if you like mashing the buttons like I do. I really owe it to myself to spend more time with this one.
Oh yeah. Sounds fun. Jacked up and good to go. Jacked up, give me something to shoot. Yes, sir. Jacked up and good to go.
This is Susumi, Tizen puzzle drama from Konami, only released in Japan. That's right, it's another puzzle game. This one's similar to PUO Puyo, only it takes it up another level entirely. You only need to match 3 colors in this game, but often some of your pieces will be trapped in boxes, and they need to be freed by matching 3 colors around them. Then they turn into regular pieces which can themselves be matched. Often you'll get a bomb piece which will trap your normal pieces and put them in boxes. And of course, your opponent crafts trapped pieces all over you. They really go nuts with this aspect. However, if you are really good, this can make for some impressive change as they're untrapped and then match and then disappear. Your character gets crazier and more animated when this happens, and of course you crap all over your opponent. You can choose your character, but there really aren't very many modes of play here. However, the visuals are absolutely fantastic. First-rate 2D sprite and background work here for sure. The audio is also very high quality. I'd believe you if you told me this was a CD game. I just wish there was a bit more music. All it's missing is the crappy full-motion video intro that everyone always skipped. Overall, this is good if you're looking for something slightly different and you find PUO Puyo too easy. Our last Tetris game is Tetris 64 from Sega. Sega, not Sega. This one was only released in Japan, and it has a few different modes. It lets you play normal Tetris, which feels pretty normal. This certainly isn't a bad thing, except maybe for these JPEG artifacts. What is it with 64-bit consoles and JPEG nastiness? Then there's Giga Tetris. This is Tetris, but now you'll occasionally get a Giga piece that falls down. These can be tough to place and make the game substantially harder to play. Lastly, there's Bio Tetris. Not sure what's biological about it, but okay. Anyway, once again, this is Tetris, but occasionally you'll get a malformed piece, and these can be almost anything from a single square to a jagged thing that can't even be described. I like this mode a lot better than Giga Tetris, but this is still less fun than regular Tetris. It always amused me how they kept trying to reinvent Tetris. They didn't need to, it was fine. The graphics do what they need to do, and they're decent if unspectacular. You have your choice of 4 different music tracks. None of them are particularly engrossing, but again, they're fine. I'd say that this one is slightly better than the new Tetris, even though this game isn't new, but Magical Tetris Challenge is still the best Tetris game on the platform. But just barely. Mainly because I like the graphics better. This one's called Wonder Project J2, and it's from Enix. This was only released in Japan, but I'm playing an English translation here. It's kind of a point-and-click adventure game mostly. It's very slow-paced, so make sure you don't have a lot going on in your life if you want to go through this one. You control a robot girl. You speak to her and control her actions through a bird that acts as your on-screen cursor. I'm not sure what her quest is exactly, as I got kind of bored if I'm being honest. I do know that there are some 3D exploration segments later on, so this game only kind of counts for this episode. Still, the 2D pixel art is fantastic, and it has lots of animations. This is another game with a layer of light grain plastered on top, similar to the new Tetris. Such an odd artistic choice. Why did they do that? The music in the parts of the game that I played was pretty weepy, and it made me tired, just like my voice is making you tired right now. This was one of the earlier games for the console, and since there wasn't much else to play at the time, this would have been good then. If it were a little snappier, I think I could give this one an honest effort. Here's Worms Armageddon from Team 17 and Infogrames. This is a turn-based strategy game that's set in a side view. Basically, there are 2 teams of worms, and you each take turns trying to destroy all of your opponent's worms using military weaponry. You have a limited amount of movement before you can attack, like most strategy games, and a bunch of different weapons to choose from. You also have to contend with the stage and blast through parts of it if it's in your way. The control isn't tremendously intuitive, but you'll get used to it after a while. For some reason, this game reminds me a lot of Lemmings, which I haven't played in forever. The graphics are sharp, if a bit minimal. There are a bunch of unique stage designs, and they all have random debris blowing in the wind behind everything. Otherwise, it's a tad plain. Likewise, the sound is also somewhat minimal with unnotable music but loud artillery and munition sound effects. However, like real worms, they talk a lot and with a British accent.
I'll get you.
If you like the Worms games, the Nintendo 64 does it 2D justice. Finally, we have Yoshi Story from Nintendo themselves. If I covered Mischief Makers, even though it had some polygonal stages, it would be a crime not to mention this one. Basically, it plays similar to Yoshi's Island on the Super Nintendo, but the gameplay has been refined to take advantage of the incredible futuristic power of the Nintendo 64. Here, you swallow enemies, hatch eggs, and eat fruit. You can also hold and aim your eggs to shoot different things, as long as you have eggs, that is. Here, you want to eat all of the fruit that you can, as that makes Yoshi happy. The goal of the game is to make all of the Yoshis happy. Therefore, most levels don't have an end goal that you're trying to reach. You simply run around until your fruit gauge is full. Once it is, Yoshi becomes happier, and that's the end of the level. Only the Nintendo 64 is advanced enough to keep Yoshi happy. Anyway, you can see how many fruits you have and how many you need, as it's always on screen. But you can hide that with the tap of the L shoulder button to make it go away. There's honestly no need for it always to be there, and it's kind of distracting, so I play with it off, and it's a much more enjoyable experience, for me at least. The control isn't the most precise thing out there, but it's serviceable. For some reason, Nintendo disallows you to use the D-pad, and you must use the analog stick, which feels awkward for a 2D game. But hey, it's Nintendo, they know best. The graphics are presented in a storybook style and look great for the system, kind of having a pre-rendered look that's a touch soft. Many stages have parallax scrolling, providing some good depth. There are some 3D model polygonal objects in a few of the stages, but it all still stays in the 2D realm. The music is exactly what you'd expect it to be, and that's silly Nintendo stuff that fits like a glove with the game. I mean, you're not going to crank the soundtrack to 11 and rock out with your friends in the mosh pit to this one, but for the game, it's perfect. Overall, I do feel that Yoshi's Island on the Super Nintendo is the better game in pretty much every category. This one doesn't have a crying baby Mario in it though, so that's kind of awesome. But this is what we got on the Nintendo 64, and it's a good game for it. So yes, it is a great game, but it's also a bit disappointing because it really should be even better. And there you go, a bunch of 2D games for the Nintendo 64. Not all of them, but hey, that's okay. The console honestly had a lot more 2D games than I thought. I always admired it when developers went 2D back then because the pressure was on them super high to go 3D. Anyway, I plan on doing an episode in the future covering 2D games on the PlayStation and also another one for 2D games on the Saturn. Can't say when, but it's gonna happen, so look forward to it if you like this episode. And anyway, what do you think of 2D games on the Nintendo 64? Let me know. In the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack. Nintendo 64, I keep making videos about you. I've got to be honest, I like the PlayStation more than you. I even like the Saturn more than you. By a lot. But I keep coming back to you. Some people might even think that I'm pandering to the Nintendo audience to get the views, but I want to talk about all of your expansion pack games. I want to talk about your 2D games. I want to talk about the 64DD. These are actually things that interest me. I wish I knew how to quit you. Am I insane? I mean, other than the fact that I'm having a one-way conversation with the video game console, am I insane? Well, that's good to know. I'm glad I'm not doing this rationally.